You are being watched, not in an obvious way, not by machines or systems, but by the people around you. Every time you step outside, you enter an arena, a quiet, invisible space where presence is felt, strength is measured, and respect is decided without a single word. Most people walk into that space unprepared. They rush their words. They explain themselves before anyone asks. They react to everything that touches them, and without noticing, they give away the one thing that protects them, inner control. Here's what most never realize. The world doesn't respond to what you mean. It responds to how you show up. Every unnecessary explanation, every emotional reaction, every moment of oversharing quietly tells others where you stand. The Stoics understood this deeply. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't perform. It doesn't chase approval. It remains steady when the world is loud. It chooses its responses carefully. And when silence comes from discipline, it isn't weakness, it's authority. Think about how much energy is lost trying to be understood. How much peace disappears replaying conversations, justifying decisions, or proving intentions that never needed to be proven. Most frustration in life isn't caused by others. It's caused by how much of ourselves we place on display in a world that isn't meant to hold it. When that leaking stops, something shifts. You don't become cold. You don't become distant. You become grounded, present, unmovable. And in a noisy world, that kind of quiet presence becomes impossible to ignore. Once you begin to notice the small habits that drain your strength, the way you speak, the way you react, the way you carry yourself, you can't unsee them. And when you correct them, you don't need to force respect. It arrives on its own. If you're choosing discipline over impulse, clarity over reaction, and calm strength over noise, consider subscribing, not for the channel, but as a reminder to stay centered in a world that constantly pulls you away from yourself. Stop telling everyone your next move. You ever notice how easy it is to talk about the things you're going to do? Maybe it's a business idea, a new routine, a plan to leave someone toxic behind. You speak it out loud, you get the nods, the encouragement, even a few good for yous, and for a moment you feel like you've already done it. That's the trap. Every time you announce your next move to the world, you release a little bit of the fuel that was meant to take you there. You spend your momentum before you've even started. There's this quiet hit of dopamine we get from saying, "I'm gonna change," and it feels good. But it also makes us comfortable. So comfortable, in fact, that we often don't do the hard part, following through. And when we don't, that's when the same people who cheered for us start whispering behind our backs. You gave them something to watch, and now they're watching you stall, quit, or spiral. This isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Real work, real growth, real transformation happens in silence, in quiet rooms, on lonely mornings, when no one's clapping. The moment you stop sharing every detail of your journey, you stop giving people the map to your inner life. That map is sacred. Keep it guarded. And if you've ever felt that sting of disappointment when you couldn't deliver on something you announced too soon, don't carry it as guilt. Carry it as a reminder. Your energy is a resource. Your vision is a responsibility. Protect it. Stop handing it out like a flyer. Every time you resist the urge to announce your next move, you reclaim power, not just from others, but from your own distractions. You stop performing and you start becoming. Because here's the truth most won't say out loud. Most people don't care as much as you think they do. They're not waiting on your breakthrough. They're waiting for gossip, for failure, for something to talk about. So give them nothing. No noise, no forecast, just the shock of your transformation when it's already done. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you announce plans without grounding them in real inner work, you're still operating from that unconscious need for approval. But when you go silent, when you go inward, you start to see what's really motivating you. And from that clarity comes control. Control over your impulses, your image, and your outcomes. That's how you begin to move like someone who doesn't need to be seen to exist. Someone who doesn't need to be praised to feel progress. You begin to carry a kind of gravity that doesn't chase attention. It attracts it, naturally, inevitably. Think about a lion. It doesn't roar before it hunts. It moves in silence, focused and efficient. It only makes noise after the kill. That's how you build respect without asking for it. By showing results that no one saw coming. By being the person who doesn't need to say, "Watch this," because the work already speaks loud enough. When you remove the need to broadcast your intentions, you also remove the pressure to live up to anyone else's timeline. You get to evolve at your own pace, without the audience, without the spotlight. You get to fail quietly, course correct, and rise again, stronger, sharper, wiser. And when that moment comes, when you finally walk into a room as someone no one expected, but everyone now feels, that's when you'll understand why silence is not emptiness. It's preparation. It's discipline. It's depth. You become less explainable and more undeniable. That's the shift. That's the difference. In a world that rewards noise, choose silence. In a culture that praises exposure, choose mystery. In a time when everyone is performing, just work. Let others post their goals. You, just keep building. Let others seek applause. You, build a life so solid, so rooted in truth, it doesn't need to be advertised. Seneca said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But the part he didn't need to say, the part the Stoics understood, is that preparation is quiet. It's the mornings no one sees, the choices no one praises, the battles no one claps for. You do it not for recognition, but for who you become in the process. That's the reward, that's the strength, and that's why you don't tell them your next move, because they'll see it when it arrives, and by then you won't need their approval. You'll already know who you are. Don't complain about your life. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than 1,000 complaints. Most people don't recognize it because they've been taught to express everything, to vent, to share, to unload. But every time you tell someone how tired you are, how unfair things feel, how much pressure you're under, what you're really saying is, "I'm not in control." That's what complaint is. It's not just a story, it's a signal that says, "I'm overwhelmed, I'm not handling this, I need someone else to take this weight off me." And sometimes that's valid, but not in public, not in passing, not to people who haven't earned your vulnerability, because most people aren't listening to help. They're listening to measure you. They're listening to decide whether you're the kind of person they can respect or the kind they can overlook. And the ones who pretend to care, some of them feel a strange comfort when you fall apart. Your weakness gives them permission to stay small. That's the hard truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You realize that the more you talk about your problems out loud, the more powerless you sound. The more you repeat, "I'm exhausted, I'm stressed, I can't catch a break," the more you train your own mind to believe that's your identity. Words don't just communicate, they carve. They carve grooves into your thinking, and soon those grooves become the path your thoughts always follow. But you don't have to walk that road forever. You can choose something different. You can decide to speak like someone who's anchored. Not perfect, not invincible, but steady, unshaken. So when life is messy, and it will be, and someone asks, "How are things?" You don't owe them the full storm. You don't have to spill everything to feel seen. You can look them in the eye, breathe and say, "I'm handling it." And that one sentence, it shifts everything. It doesn't deny your struggle, it reframes it. It tells the world, I might be carrying weight, but I'm not collapsing. I'm not broadcasting pain to get sympathy. I'm moving forward. That kind of presence draws a different kind of attention. It tells people you're someone who can be trusted in chaos, someone who doesn't drown out loud. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the core of it. You don't control everything that happens, but you always control how you carry it. And complaint? It's a leak in that control. It's a small cut that drains your presence, your dignity, your sharpness. The Stoics weren't emotionless, they were disciplined. They didn't pretend life was easy. They simply refused to let the world see them lose grip of themselves. They suffered, but they suffered with a certain quiet pride. And that's what makes a person unforgettable. Not their complaints, but the way they walk through fire without announcing every burn. It doesn't mean you can't ever open up. But there's a time, a place, and a person for that. A journal, a therapist, a close friend who's earned your honesty. But not everyone, not everywhere. Public complaining is like bleeding into the ocean. It doesn't make you safer, it makes you more vulnerable. It draws sharks. And they don't feel sorry for you. They circle. That's not fear-based thinking. That's pattern recognition. It's understanding that people treat you based on the image you consistently present. If you walk around heavy, burdened, and constantly verbalizing your exhaustion, you become background noise. But if you walk with calm, even through pain, you become someone others look to, not past. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And one of the ways we waste it most is by narrating our pain instead of transforming it, by filling rooms with our complaints instead of building resilience in silence. Every moment spent complaining is a moment lost from building solutions, from conserving strength, from holding your frame. And if you're really tired, rest. Don't rant. If something is truly unfair, respond. Don't repeat it to anyone who will listen, because even if the system is broken, even if the struggle is real, you still have power. The power to decide how you show up, the power to respond with presence, not panic. And that power multiplies the moment you stop handing it out for cheap relief. Eventually, people stop asking if you're okay, not because they don't care, but because they already know. They see it in how you carry yourself. You become the type of person who inspires steadiness without ever preaching it, because you didn't post it. You lived it. That's power. That's influence. Not being the loudest, but being the one who doesn't fold. In a world where everyone is venting for likes and sympathy, your silence, your centeredness, your ability to endure without performance becomes magnetic. And it makes people pause, not just to look at you, but to question themselves. So hold your center, vent where it's safe, not where it's convenient. When life pulls at you, don't flinch. When your mind screams, let your face stay calm, not for pride, for peace. Because once you realize how much energy you were wasting explaining your pain to people who can't carry it, you'll never go back. You'll protect your calm the way others protect their image. And in that, you'll find a power most people never touch. The kind that doesn't just survive struggle, but shapes it into silence that commands respect. Never lose your cool. There's a moment, right before you explode, when everything inside you is burning. Your hands tighten, your chest rises, your throat wants to unleash every sharp word sitting on the edge of your tongue. And in that moment, it feels like the only thing that will make it better is letting it out, saying it, shouting it, proving that you're not someone to be messed with. But the truth is, every time you lose your cool, you hand your power to someone else. You show them exactly how to control you. They push a button and you react like a machine. It doesn't matter if you're right. It doesn't matter how wrong they are. What people remember is how you behaved. And anger, visible, loud, public anger, leaves a stain. It doesn't read as strength. It reads as instability. The person who cuts you off in traffic, the co-worker who talks down to you, the stranger who throws shade, they don't need to be corrected. They need to be outgrown. Because when you fight to defend your pride, you often lose something more valuable, your peace. That's the trap. They poke, and you react. You defend, you argue, you escalate. But what if you didn't? What if you did nothing? What if you just looked at them, still, calm, unbothered, and walked away? That kind of restraint is rare. It's not passive. It's intentional. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. It's choosing not to let someone else write your emotional script. In the philosophy of the Stoics, restraint wasn't just a virtue, it was the foundation of self-respect. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay, because in that delay something happens. You see clearer. You hear past the insult. You realize most of what's said to provoke you isn't even about you. It's projection. It's pain leaking out of someone else, trying to pull you into its orbit. But when you don't respond, when you keep your voice steady, your eyes still, and your words few, you become untouchable. And nothing unsettles a loud, reactive person more than silence. That silence is sharp. It cuts through tension without adding to it. People expect heat. When they get stillness, they become uncomfortable in their own noise. That's when the shift happens. You stop being seen as someone who can be manipulated. You start being seen as someone who can't be shaken. That's a different kind of respect, the kind that doesn't need to be demanded. It's given, voluntarily, because people sense that your reactions are measured, that you're in control, not just of the moment, but of yourself. Imagine you're in a room and someone tries to start a fire. They expect you to throw gasoline on it. Instead, you sit back, you pour water, or you leave entirely. That response teaches them everything they need to know. You're not here to burn, you're here to build. And people will test that, especially when they see you rising, especially when your silence starts speaking louder than their noise. That's when the temptations will come dressed as arguments, insults, and provocations. Don't take the bait. Protect your composure like it's your reputation, because it is. There's nothing noble about exploding. There's nothing impressive about being easily provoked. Anyone can yell. Anyone can snap. But it takes discipline to remain calm when you're being disrespected. It takes inner strength to know your worth without having to announce it. And that calm, that deep, steady calm, it creates an aura that makes people think twice before crossing you, because they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you'll do. And that mystery, that's power. Aristotle once said, "Anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, that is not easy. That is mastery. And the world doesn't need more reactors. It needs more steady hands. People who can be in the fire and not burn others. People who can feel everything but choose what to express. That's who you become when you stop letting other people drag you into their storms. You stay still. You become the eye of it. It's not always about walking away. Sometimes you stand your ground. But even then, you speak with intention. You choose your words the way a craftsman chooses tools, not to destroy, but to shape. You don't yell to be heard. You speak low so others have to quiet down to listen. You teach with your tone. You lead by example, and your calm becomes contagious. That's the ripple effect of emotional discipline. It doesn't just change how people see you. It changes how people show up around you. And eventually, when the people who once tried to provoke you realize you're no longer dancing to their tune, they'll stop playing the song. Because nothing is more frustrating to the one who wants your attention than your complete indifference. And nothing is more powerful than walking away from chaos without letting it change your state. That's where your strength is, not in shouting louder, but in needing to say less. Not in showing force, but in holding back. There will always be something trying to shake you. But if you've built peace inside, nothing outside can steal it. And when people see that you're steady no matter what, they'll either respect it or they'll leave. Either way, you win. Because true power never needs to prove itself. It just is. Quiet, calm, composed, stoic. Don't apologize just to keep the peace. There's a kind of apology that doesn't come from remorse. It comes from fear. Not the fear of doing harm, but the fear of making people uncomfortable. You know the one. You walk into a room a few minutes late, and before you even settle in, you rush out a soft, "Sorry I'm late," even if no one was really waiting, or someone bumps into you, and you instinctively say, "Sorry." You voice an opinion, feel the tension rise, and suddenly backtrack with a quick, "Sorry, just my thought." It becomes a reflex, a habit, but behind that habit is a deeper truth. You're apologizing not for something you did, but for taking up space. And that kind of apology doesn't make you humble, it makes you invisible. It's easy to confuse being polite with being submissive. But there's a sharp difference. Politeness is about respect. Submissiveness is about shrinking. And when you start to shrink yourself just to keep the peace, you send a message you may not even realize you're sending. You're telling the world, "My presence is a problem. My thoughts are an inconvenience. My boundaries are a burden." And once people sense that, they stop treating you as an equal. They start expecting you to bend, to step aside, to soften every truth and silence every instinct. Not because you did something wrong, but because you've trained them to expect your silence before your strength. There's nothing wrong with saying sorry when you actually did something wrong. That kind of apology is sacred. It repairs trust. It shows growth. It holds weight. But when sorry becomes a way to smooth over every moment of discomfort, it loses its meaning. It becomes noise, and worse, it becomes a leash. The more you over-apologize, the easier it is for others to tug on that leash and pull you wherever they want you to go. Over time, your self-respect starts to erode, not in big dramatic ways, but in quiet daily patterns. The skipped opinion, the swallowed emotion, the forced smile after being interrupted, and all of it rooted in the belief that your comfort should come second to everyone else's. The Stoics believed in balance, not arrogance, not false humility, but strength rooted in clarity. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." If you believe every disagreement means you've done something wrong, you'll live your life trying to make everyone feel better, even if it makes you feel worse. But when you realize that disagreement is part of life, and that not everyone is owed an apology simply because they're uncomfortable, you reclaim something important, your right to be whole, even when the room doesn't approve. And it doesn't take aggression to shift this, it just takes presence. The next time you're tempted to say sorry for being late, try, "Thanks for waiting." It honors their time without erasing your own. When someone questions your opinion, try, "I see it differently," instead of, "Sorry, maybe I'm wrong." These are small changes, but they speak volumes. They say, "I'm aware, I'm respectful, but I'm not retreating." And the more you do it, the more you train yourself to stand on solid ground, even when the conversation gets shaky. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and becoming who you truly are means you will not fit neatly into every room. You will not agree with every voice. You will not be understood by everyone. But if you water yourself down just to be accepted, what exactly is being accepted? A filtered version of you, a shadow, not the full substance. And that shadow can't lead. It can't connect in any real way, because it's not honest. When you start practicing this quiet ownership of self, you'll notice something shift. You'll feel lighter, not because you're carrying less, but because you're no longer carrying what doesn't belong to you. You'll walk into a room with the same presence, but a different posture. You'll speak with the same kindness, but without the fear of being misunderstood. And when the moment comes where you truly did hurt someone, when the apology is real, it'll come from strength, not shame, and it'll be felt, because it won't be the 100th sorry they've heard. It'll be the one that mattered. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And sometimes being one means being firm, not for pride, not for power, but for peace, the kind that only exists when you stop apologizing for your existence and start standing fully in it. You don't owe the world an apology for breathing, for thinking, for choosing. You owe it your integrity, your example, your truth. So the next time you feel that word slipping out, sorry, ask yourself, is this humility or is it fear? Am I owning my impact or am I erasing myself again? Because you don't need to be harsh to be strong, you just need to be whole. And wholeness begins when you stop saying sorry for who you are. Keep your money talk to yourself. Money has always been one of those subjects that reveals more than it seems to. The moment you start talking about how much you make, what you own, or what you don't have, you open a door that can't be easily closed. Say you're broke, and some people will see you as lazy, careless, or undeserving, even if they don't know a single detail about your story. Say you're doing well, and suddenly the room feels colder. Jealousy shows up, even from people you thought were rooting for you. That's the trap. The more you expose your financial position in either direction, the more you invite opinions, envy, judgment, or even exploitation. Whether you're ahead or behind, once you start broadcasting it, you're giving people access to something they haven't earned the right to handle. There's a subtle kind of power in financial ambiguity, in not letting the world know exactly where you stand. It creates space to grow without pressure, to adjust without scrutiny, and to carry yourself without being boxed in by someone else's expectations. People don't need to know if you're struggling, and they don't need to know if you're succeeding, because real wealth doesn't announce itself. It's felt. It's seen in the way you move, the way you speak, the way you handle pressure without panic, and success without noise. That kind of energy can't be faked, but it also doesn't need to be explained. We live in a time where money is often mistaken for identity. Flashy cars, name brands, screenshots of bank accounts, price tags left on things so people know what they cost. But that's not confidence, it's compensation. And it usually says more about what someone is trying to prove than what they actually have. There's a reason the people who truly have long-term wealth tend to speak the least about it. Because they've learned that the moment you make money your personality, you become a target. Not just for criticism, but for comparison, manipulation, and unwanted attention. The more you talk, the more you give people something to aim at. And once your self-worth is tied to what you show, you'll constantly need to show more just to feel the same. The Stoics understood this before modern psychology ever did. They weren't against having money, they were against being owned by it. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." That's the difference. When you speak less about your financial status, you become less reactive to the highs and lows of it. You stop defining your value by digits. You start asking better questions, not how do I look, but how am I growing? Not do they think I'm successful, but do I think I'm grounded? And the truth is, no one really wants to hear about your money situation. If you're broke, it makes them uncomfortable. If you're thriving, it makes them insecure. That's just human nature. Talking about money doesn't build connection. It builds distance. It separates instead of uniting, especially in public, where motives get mixed and egos get involved. Keeping quiet isn't secrecy, it's strategy, it's wisdom, it's protecting something that matters by keeping it private. Because not everything sacred should be seen, not everything earned needs to be displayed. When you carry yourself with quiet composure, people notice, even if they don't know why. The clean fit, the calm expression, the focused energy, it gives the impression that things are in order, even if they aren't yet. That's the art. Walking like someone who's rich in discipline, rich in focus, rich in peace. None of that requires a high income. It just requires intention. You don't need to pretend to have what you don't. You just need to stop explaining what you do. Keep your circle tight. Share with people who have proven they can handle your wins and your worries. Everyone else, let them wonder. Aristotle reminded us, the ultimate value of life depends upon awareness and the power of contemplation rather than upon mere survival. When you stop trying to show people your worth, you finally start to feel it. You start to realize that it's not about hiding, it's about protecting, not about being secretive, it's about being selective. Not everyone needs access, not everyone should get it. Your peace, your growth, your financial journey, those are yours to carry, to adjust and to build, without the noise of everyone else's expectations in your ear. So let them guess. Let them wonder if you're building something big or starting from scratch. Let them see your calm and feel your confidence without needing to explain a thing. The less they know, the less they can interfere, and the more you'll realize that true power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being solid, on the inside. Let your life speak. Let your character earn interest. And let your actions, not your bank balance, define who you are. Never gossip, ever. There's something oddly satisfying about gossip. It makes you feel like you're on the inside, like you've been let in on something exclusive, something not everyone gets to hear. It's tempting, especially when the conversation flows naturally into a complaint or a judgment about someone who isn't around. And in those moments, you might feel closer to the person you're talking to, like the two of you have built some hidden alliance. But that feeling is fragile, because what feels like connection in the moment quickly turns into suspicion the moment you're out of the room. If you gossip with someone, there's an unspoken truth that hovers in their mind. If they'll talk like this about them, they'll talk like this about me. Trust doesn't grow from that. It fractures. The strange part is that gossip doesn't always come from a place of hate. Sometimes it's boredom, sometimes it's insecurity, sometimes it's just a need to belong. But regardless of where it starts, it leads to the same place, diminished respect. Because the moment your name becomes associated with whispered conversations and second-hand stories, people stop seeing you as solid. You become slippery, uncertain, and no one wants to trust what isn't stable. Even those who indulge in gossip with you will be more cautious around you afterward. They might laugh, nod, and agree in the moment, but deep down, they're already filing away the fact that your loyalty comes with a side of loose lips. The people who carry the most weight in a room usually speak the least about others. They have presence, but not noise. They hear everything but repeat nothing. And that kind of restraint makes them magnetic, unpredictable. You're not quite sure what they think, and that uncertainty gives them power. When you never know what someone will say, you tread more carefully around them. You speak more thoughtfully. You respect the silence they keep. That's how influence begins, not by dominating the conversation, but by mastering your response. Gossip is cheap currency. It spends easily and runs out fast. High-value people, people who lead, people who shape their environment, they don't invest in it. They're too focused on ideas, direction, growth. Talking about people is a distraction, a way to avoid dealing with your own path. It gives you the illusion of importance without requiring any work. That's why it's so addictive. But it's also why it's so dangerous. The more time you spend talking about other people's lives, the less time you're investing in your own. And over time, that becomes obvious, not just to others, but to you. There's also a deeper cost to gossip, one that doesn't get talked about enough. It drains your clarity. Every time you absorb someone else's negative view of another person, it influences your own perception. Suddenly you start seeing flaws you didn't notice before. You start interpreting neutral actions through a tinted lens. That second-hand bitterness becomes your own, even if it wasn't yours to begin with. And now your relationships, your view of the world, become shaped by someone else's unresolved issues. That's not insight. That's pollution. It's not about being cold or distant. You can still be warm, still be engaging, still be present. But your silence on other people's names becomes part of your character. You listen, you nod, you might even smile, but you don't add, you don't share, you don't confirm. And slowly, people start to realize that their secrets are safe with you, that you're not just someone who's easy to talk to, you're someone who's safe to trust. That kind of reputation doesn't come from loud declarations of loyalty. It comes from restraint, consistency, integrity when no one's watching. Being the person who doesn't gossip doesn't mean you don't know what's going on. Often you'll know more than most, but you learn to hold that knowledge, to sit with it, to use it wisely, not recklessly, because you understand that speech has weight, and not every thought deserves to be spoken. That's a kind of wisdom that builds over time. That's the kind of strength that doesn't show up in headlines or gossip circles, but in the quiet respect people carry for you. So when the next moment comes, and it will, when someone leans in and says, "Did you hear about?" You'll feel that fork in the road. You can join in, you can feed the moment, or you can rise above it. Stay neutral, say little, change the subject. Let your character interrupt the cycle, and trust that over time, that silence becomes louder than anything you could have said. There's enough noise in the world already. Be the one who holds peace. Be the one who protects dignity. Be the one who sees everything and says little. Because the person who guards their words guards their power. And the person who doesn't trade in gossip becomes the one everyone wants in their corner, especially when things get real. Stop explaining your beliefs. We live in a world obsessed with declaration. Everyone feels like they have to explain their every choice, their diet, their schedule, their beliefs, their routine. It's become normal to narrate your life in real time, like if you don't post about it, it never happened. But here's the truth that hits a little deeper. The more you explain yourself, the more you weaken your stance. Every time you try to justify why you wake up early, why you avoid certain habits, why you believe in certain values, you invite someone else's judgment. You turn your personal code into public debate. And once it's up for debate, you're no longer living it for yourself. You're performing. The moment you declare your beliefs, especially when you're still growing in them, you place yourself in a box. People start watching, not out of admiration, but out of curiosity. Waiting for the moment you slip. Waiting to see if you really live what you say. That pressure? It's subtle, but real, and it often leads to one of two places: self-censorship or burnout. You either start hiding your failures or you wear yourself out trying to be perfect. Both are traps. Both pull you away from real growth. It's better to be underestimated than to be constantly scrutinized. If you're building discipline, build it in silence. If you're healing, heal in private. If you've found a philosophy that gives you strength, let it shape how you move, not how you speak. People will notice. That's the thing about truth. It reveals itself. You don't have to advertise it. When someone sees you staying calm under pressure, walking away from drama, choosing solitude over chaos, they'll know something's changed. They'll feel it before they hear it. And when they ask, "What's going on with you lately?" that's your moment, not to preach, but to offer a glimpse. Explaining your beliefs often comes from a place of insecurity, a quiet need to be validated, to be seen as someone who's doing the right thing. But confidence doesn't chase reassurance. It stands firm, quietly, like a tree. It doesn't wave a banner, it just grows. And the same is true for personal transformation. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That single line holds a lot of weight, because in the end, no one remembers your intentions. They remember your impact. They remember how you made them feel, how you handled chaos, how you carried yourself when no one was clapping. People don't need your explanations. They need your example. And your example doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. Even if you're still figuring things out, even if you're still failing some days, your quiet persistence teaches more than 100 conversations ever could. Your ability to get back up, to stay consistent, to keep showing up without posting about it, that's the message. That's the testimony. And if you're surrounded by people who constantly question your shift, who mock your discipline, who call you different or distant or too serious, that's not a sign to explain. That's a sign to keep going. Your growth might be making them uncomfortable. That's okay. It's not your job to drag them with you. It's your job to stay aligned with your path. Let them think you're weird. Let them think you're obsessed. Let them wonder. They're supposed to. When the time is right, when they're ready, they'll remember the one person who didn't lecture them, but showed them. And that's when they'll come back. Not for an argument, but for guidance. Because by then, you'll have something real to offer. Something earned, not preached, but proven. That's how true influence is built. Slowly, quietly, unshakably. Socrates once said, "The way to gain a good reputation is to endeavor to be what you desire to appear. Don't talk like you've arrived. Walk like you're becoming. Let your discipline be felt before it's spoken. Let your peace make more noise than your explanations ever will. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand yourself and to protect that understanding like it's sacred." So stop offering blueprints to people who aren't building anything. Stop handing out your convictions like flyers. If they're true, they'll hold up without your defense. If they're not, they'll fall, and that's how you'll learn. Either way, the process is yours, not theirs. You don't owe the world a speech. You owe yourself alignment. You owe yourself the freedom to grow without performance. The freedom to walk away from arguments that lead nowhere. To stay silent when silence holds more weight than 1,000 justifications. Because in the end, your life is the loudest thing you'll ever say. Let it speak, let it teach, let it lead, without needing to explain. Never seek validation in public. There's something deeply human about wanting to be seen, not just noticed, but truly acknowledged. You want your efforts to matter, your thoughts to be heard, your existence to feel valuable in the eyes of others. And at first glance, there's nothing wrong with that. It feels harmless to hope someone appreciates the work you've done, the growth you've fought for, the strength it took to get through what no one else saw. But the problem isn't the desire, it's the dependence. It's when your identity becomes hooked to the reactions around you, when your value rises and falls based on a comment, a like, a nod, or silence. That's when you've handed the remote control of your emotional life to other people, and suddenly your peace is no longer yours. Validation feels good, it always will, but the need for it, that's where the weakness starts to grow, because when you start doing things just to be noticed, you stop doing them with intention. You post the workout not because it made you stronger, but because you want someone to clap. You voice your goals, not to commit to them, but to earn temporary respect. And now your motivation is tied to a loop you can't control. If they notice, you feel worthy. If they don't, you question everything. But the truth is, the most powerful work you'll ever do will be invisible. The habits you build in silence, the mental battles you win that no one celebrates, the quiet discipline that carries you through when no one's watching, that's the foundation of real strength. It's easy to get caught in the performance loop, especially today. Social media makes it so natural to curate your every move, but here's what's more rare and more powerful. Doing the work in private, sticking to your word when no one knows what you promised yourself, working on your craft, your body, your habits, not for a post, not for praise, but because it makes you sharper, because it makes you solid, because it's who you're becoming. That kind of discipline creates a gravity, and when people feel it, they'll start wondering, they'll start paying attention. But the moment you go looking for it, chasing their attention, it vanishes, like smoke. There's a strange paradox here. The less you need validation, the more of it you attract. Not because you're trying, but because people are drawn to grounded energy. They sense when someone is calm in their skin, when someone moves without trying to impress. That's rare, and that's why it's powerful. The person who isn't broadcasting their journey, but just quietly leveling up, that person becomes a mystery, a presence. And mystery carries more influence than transparency ever will. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's hard to swallow in a world where everyone's performing excellence, but it's true. Real growth will often make you invisible. While you're changing, the world won't always notice. While you're rising, they may still think you're where you were yesterday. That's okay. The seed doesn't demand attention as it grows underground, and yet, one day, it breaks through, unstoppable. You don't need to announce your evolution, just become it, and let the results do what your words never could. And when people finally notice, because they will, you won't be desperate for it. You'll be grateful, maybe, but not defined by it. Their praise will be appreciated, but not needed. Their silence won't sting, because you've already made peace with the quiet. That's what it means to be free, to be your own witness, to clap for yourself in empty rooms, to wake up and know that you're on the right path, not because they told you, but because you can feel it in your bones. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom," and part of that knowing means recognizing when you're still seeking proof that you matter. When you catch yourself fishing for compliments, trying too hard to be seen, ask yourself, what am I really looking for? And what would happen if I gave that to myself instead? Because once you stop performing, you start transforming. Once you stop needing the applause, your hands are finally free to build something real, something solid, something that doesn't fall apart when the audience leaves. So do the work, show up, improve quietly, stay consistent, and let the world catch up when it's ready. You don't need a stage to become powerful. You just need silence, direction, and the courage to keep going when no one's clapping. That's where your real value lives. not in being seen, but in being true. Don't bleed in front of strangers. There's nothing weak about feeling deeply. Real strength doesn't come from pretending you're made of stone. It comes from knowing exactly where your wounds are and choosing carefully who gets to see them. We're often told that vulnerability is power, that sharing our emotions with the world makes us brave. And in some cases, it does. But there's a fine line between healing and bleeding out in public, between opening up and giving away parts of yourself to people who haven't earned the right to hold them. And when you cross that line too often, you don't feel lighter, you feel exposed, raw, powerless. It's easy to confuse being open with being honest, but honesty without boundaries isn't truth. It's a leak. Your fears, your shame, your unhealed trauma, these aren't things to hand out like flyers. They're sacred, private. They belong in safe spaces with people who listen without turning it into gossip, with people who see your scars and don't flinch. When you pour your heart out in the wrong room, you don't always get support. Sometimes you get silence. Or worse, you get someone who sees your pain as a weakness to be used against you. That's the risk. And in a world that's quick to judge and slow to understand, not everyone needs access to your shadow. There's a kind of dignity in suffering quietly, not because you're ashamed, but because you're aware that not every story needs to be told right away, aware that your healing is yours, and rushing to display it doesn't speed it up. When you're still in the middle of the storm, still figuring out what the pain means, there's no prize for putting it on display. In fact, sometimes it sets you back, because now your healing has an audience, and with an audience comes pressure, expectations, unwanted opinions. Suddenly your grief becomes content, your wounds become performance, and you can't tell anymore if you're actually healing or just acting like you are. That doesn't mean you have to pretend to be okay when you're not. It doesn't mean bottling everything up until you explode. It means learning the difference between being authentic and being careless with your truth. It means knowing who deserves to hear your pain and who doesn't. It means choosing your confidants the way you choose a surgeon, carefully, intentionally, with a sense of trust and respect. Because the people who really care about you won't need a full breakdown to know something's wrong. They'll notice the shifts. They'll feel the silence. And when you do open up, they'll hold space, not judgment. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That applies here too. When the world tries to break you, you don't owe it a breakdown. You owe yourself recovery. Quiet, focused recovery. You don't need to show your scars as soon as they form. Let them heal, let them settle, and when you're ready, show up, not as someone still bleeding, but as someone who has bled and survived. There's a strength in that kind of silence, a strength that doesn't seek attention, but earns respect. We're all carrying something, pain that isn't always visible, doubt that doesn't always make sense, but not all of it needs to be spoken aloud. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is go through it quietly, process it deeply, let it shape you from the inside out without needing an audience to witness every step. That's not repression, that's refinement. It's the practice of taking your story and owning it, not handing it over for others to dissect. There will be times when your emotions overflow. That's okay. You're human. Let them come. But don't feel obligated to turn every moment of pain into a story for the world to hear. Save some chapters for yourself, for the ones who've been there, for the ones who actually care. And when the time is right, when the storm has passed and your voice is steady, maybe then you share. Not because you need to, but because your healing might help someone else rise. That's when your vulnerability becomes power. Not a cry for help, but a signal of hope. Seneca once said, We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Sometimes the act of sharing too soon makes the pain feel bigger than it is. It multiplies, it grows under the pressure of public attention. But when you carry it inward first, when you breathe, reflect, and rebuild in silence, you learn that not all suffering needs to be shared to be released. Some of it just needs time, stillness, a quiet place to unravel and realign. So the next time you feel like spilling your heart to the wrong people, pause. Ask yourself, will this help me heal, or will it just feed the fire? And when you step back into the world after everything you've carried, walk like someone who's been through the storm and made peace with it. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've forgiven. Not because you're hiding, but because you're healing. And healing, when done with intention, doesn't need an audience. It just needs truth, stillness, and time. The strongest version of you isn't the one that shouts the loudest or reveals the most. It's the one that moves with quiet purpose, rooted in discipline, self-respect, and peace. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just keep showing up, calmly, consistently, and let your life speak for itself. If this message resonated, there's another video on the screen right now that will take you deeper into this path. Watch it next, and thank you for walking this journey with us. You're not alone. You're part of the Stoic Journal,